morning, everyone. I am Frankie, and I have this really cool kid. His name is Finn. He's 4 years old, right? He's like slightly famous at Connect. It's because he's so cool. He's way cooler than I am. So I always try to start one of my talks with just a story about Finn because he just helps make me cool because I'm his mom. So for Halloween, Finn dressed up as Superman. And he went door to door, and whenever he was greeted at a door, people would go, "Superman, hey Superman, nice cape, Superman, did you fly here? Like, nice hair, you got the curl." And everyone kept calling him Superman. And we walked down the street, and he begins to chuckle, like really quietly. He's like, "Mom, everyone thinks I'm Superman. They don't know I'm really just a kid under here. I tricked them." Oh my goodness, I love this guy. He is my favorite. But he reminded me that I've kind of tricked you guys a little bit. I got to host Alpha a few weeks back. Oh, I better put on a timer before I get started, and I'll tell all the Finn stories, and then we'll be here all day. Sorry, here we go. Now we're good. I hosted Alpha a few weeks back, and I got to sit at a table and eat dinner with a few of you. And someone told me that their first time that they came to Connect, I was the speaker. And I was like, "Oh, you came back." Whew. I did all right. And then he said, "Actually, for a while there, I thought you were one of the lead pastors." I was like, "Oh, I tricked you." I am not one of the lead pastors. There's nothing wrong with being a lead pastor, but I am not. I am a part-time bookkeeper, full-time mom. Like, that is my vocation. But coming up on here on stage, like, the people who present here, the people who talk here, we live lives just like the rest of you. But like, as a really, like, I sit in these seats, usually somewhere over here. I sit in these seats over here, and I don't know what the clipboards are for either. Like, when they go around, like, you're like, "What are these for?" I'm like, "I don't know." Like, just like you guys. Just like you guys. But if I could be anyone, if I could be someone extra special, I'd be Bob Goff. I got a picture of me and Bob. It's kind of grainy because of all my old phones, but I would be Bob Goff. Bob Goff is the 60-year-old guy. He's written a whole bunch of books, and they're like, some of them are like bestsellers, most of them are bestsellers. And he writes these really cool stuff. You should go check him out. He's one of my favorites. He not only like writes books and talks about God, he also like flies a float plane. Like, that's super cool. And he wears rainbow socks, and he always makes people feel really seen and known. Like, if I could just like check all those things off of my list, I'd be succeeding. A word that I've heard used to describe Bob is that he is effervescent. And I love that. I love that word, effervescent. And I also really love it because someone described me as effervescent once, which means me and Bob have some things in common. Yeah. So maybe I can pull this thing off eventually. I just gotta get really tall and grow a beard. No. When they called me effervescent, they said, "Frankie, but do you know what effervescent is?" And I was like, "No." And they went on to describe effervescence. Think about those Alka-Seltzer commercials, you know, with the cup and the tablet that falls in the water and it goes. That is effervescence. And immediately I felt known. Immediately I recognized that that was true for me. There is something deep within me that is true. I am effervescent. I have this airiness, bubbliness about me. Not like bubbly like a hard boil bubbly, but like light and fizzy and kind of like tickly bubbles. I'm like, this is me. When someone says something about you and it speaks really true to you, like deep in your being, in your most true sense and self, you're going to know that because in our deep core and innermost beings, we bear the image of God. And so it's going to be something that's kind of like God. And I don't know about you, but sometimes God is just like this tickly bubbliness. And so I knew right then and there that I am effervescent. But to be honest, lately, I have not been so effervescent. For those of you who don't know, because I can't assume that you follow me on Instagram or that you were here last time I was on stage, my family's been through a hard season. At the beginning of this year, I was pregnant, and I went into an ultrasound, and we learned that my baby was not well. She had a hole in the back of her skull, her skull hadn't closed properly, and her brain matter came out. It's kind of important, your brain, to be in your head. And we were so close to being halfway there, and I held her lifeless body in my arms. And it wrecked me. And I haven't been so effervescent. And that's okay. I will be effervescent again because it's who I am. But for this season, a stillness and a quietness to reflect on this emotional pain has been the thing that I needed to do. If I'm going to weather this storm well, I need to set aside the easy, natural effervescence and face these emotions, knowing I will come back to my effervescent self because it's who I am. I'm not just one tablet that fizzles out. I'm like a whole box. We're in a sermon series right now called Jesus Stinks and So Should You. I did not approve of this title, just to be clear. No, I didn't. I did not. Frank, I think made it up on his own. I'm not certain. Again, I'm not the lead pastor, so I don't know. But it's grown on me. It really has. This idea that we live in this sterile society, and that's not the type of Jesus that we know. Our world has embraced this overly clean lifestyle. We have Lysol disinfectant wipes everywhere. In your mom's purse, in the truck, in the classrooms, in the house. You name it, it's probably there, right? We've got antibacterial everything. We've got ultra strength underarm deodorant because heaven forbid you might stink when you sweat. Isn't that the point? I don't know. I am very thankful for running water and our health education and hand washing that has improved our mortality rates and our standard of living, don't get me wrong, but we may have overdone it a little. I'm not the only one who thinks this. The World Health Organization a few weeks ago was on the bandwagon of reminding developed nations that we are overusing antibacterials and antibiotics, and we've got all these superbugs going on. And we need to work to mitigate that. There are children, not so much here in the Kootenays, but in bigger metropolises that actually aren't being exposed to dirt enough, so doctors are prescribing medical-grade dirt pills. It's a real thing. Because we know when you get a little dirty, it's good for you, right? This over-obsession with a sterile, clean, whitewashed kind of thing has not just stuck with our physical world. We have kind of migrated this over into our personal lives. We like to put on a facade that things are okay. I'm doing all right. There's nothing really going on. Things are peachy. And it's also bled into our churches. I'm sorry, but we as a church, we have begun to idolize a clean, peacey, zen sort of Jesus who wears white robes and sashes and floats while he walks, pets lambs, and holds babies. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know that picture? But when we open our Bible, that is not the man that we read about. We read about the Son of God and flesh in one. We see that he didn't live a life afraid of getting messy. Jesus was gritty and bold and even sly. And this morning, it is my job to talk about how he got a little emotional, messy as well. It's an odd one to talk about, to be honest. We know that Jesus was emotional. We know it, but we don't give it a lot of airtime. We might say it in passing, Jesus was emotional, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's just kind of this little small thing. and it's not the big thing that we talk about. We've got a few stories in the Bible. We've got him in the garden. We've got him weeping more than once, to be clear. We've got some passionate exchanges, and there's that time that he flipped the tables, which Frank did a whole message on last week, and it was fantastic. Go back and listen to it. It's really good. But we've got a few stories, but did he live an emotional life? When I was tasked with this sermon, I was like, I don't know if I can speak on this because I'm not really sure. So I had to go do some digging. And it turns out he did. But I think we miss it because the stories, when we read them, we kind of breeze over it. When we read about his emotions, they're kind of these very small descriptions. When he saw them coming, he was overcome with pity and healed their sick. It says, when he looked out over the crowd, his heart broke. When he saw her weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, and Jesus wept. He looked out over a city, and at the view of it, he wept over it. He even said at one point, rejoice with me. And another time he's described as being that Jesus rejoiced and was exuberant in the Holy Spirit. But then the stories continue on. We get just like these little tiny descriptions. They're not like when you read a novel and it's like deep and in depth and it describes how his breath stopped and his jaw clenched and his face went flush or maybe pale. We don't hear his deep swallow as it was hard to speak. We don't see his eyes get a little bit watery. Right? Like, the authors of the Bible didn't give us those descriptions. Really, what we get is the biblical version of a GIF. Now, unfortunately, this morning, I just found out a few minutes ago that my GIFs aren't working, so instead we get little pictures, which I think kind of works as well. GIFs are these little images that only last about 2.2 seconds, and they just display for a moment, and we get just a little picture. So I had this one, which just we see this guy here. My next one is Randall. Do you guys know what show this is from? Oh, good. This is not going to work if you don't. I mean, if you don't, I can try to explain it to you. This is a show called This Is Us. When you watch it, your heart breaks. End of story. If you don't want to feel feels, don't watch this show because you're going to feel them. Just end of story. Next one. And here's Kevin. Okay. The thing is that us who know this show, we can feel some of this. But can we admit, if someone out here doesn't know this show, they're like, I don't get it? Yeah, it's not making any sense. They're like, Frankie, why are you going on stage? It's because we dedicate that 45 minutes where we experience something and we're all in there and we feel all of this emotion and there's everything happening and our hearts are breaking and we see these and we get it. When we read our Bibles, sometimes when we're reading it and we just get these 2.2 seconds of Jesus' emotion, it's like experiencing This Is Us through these images. It's not much good. That first one there was Jack when he was in a hospital room and he had learned that his third child had died and now he was getting ready to go tell his wife who was in the hospital room that they had lost that child. That's a lot. You don't see that in the little picture, right? We need to read Scripture and understand there's a whole lot going on. The night before Jesus dies, he's in the garden. And Mark describes it like this. He took Peter, James, and John with him, and as they left the larger group behind, he became distressed and filled with sorrow. 2.2 seconds of a description. If we compare it to our images, and then the experience that we feel when we watch those shows, we can get a bit of a better understanding. It continues in Mark 14, verse 35. He walked on a little further. Then he threw himself on the ground and prayed for deliverance. Like that one picture of Kevin there, just just so agonizing, filled with distress and sorrow, it says. He prays, Abba, Father, I know that anything is possible for you. Please take this cup away so I don't have to drink from it. But whatever happens, let your will be done, not mine. Jesus felt. And he was emotional. He could be emotional himself. And we can relate to him in that emotion because he was God with us. We are obsessed with our sterile world, and we're always just so afraid to come close, but Jesus wasn't, you guys. He wasn't afraid to come close, and that's what got him a little stinky sometimes. We treat people's emotional messiness kind of like it's the common cold. If I'm like, guys, I'm not feeling so great, you're like, step away. And I don't think we do this on purpose, but we keep an arm's length distance from people's messiness. You guys, if I don't mention and talk with a person about the death of her daughter, or the test results that came back from the lab, or his layoff, or their stay at the psych ward, or that episode with them and their kids in the parking lot, I am saying I want an arm's length relationship to you and your messiness. It's like, I don't want to catch your sad, like it's a cold, which is an odd thing, right? Because the opposite is true. If a person is displaying authentic joy and passion, and they just have this life within them, like you guys know some of those people, right? And you're like, I want some of that. I want to be like Bob Goff. When we lost Etta, the people who came so emotionally close and wept with us and cried with us and held us, those people are the same people who, when we announced our pregnancy, were like, what? We're super stoked. They celebrated big because they could feel big. We only experience the highs as far as we are willing to experience the lows because our feelings come from the same well. I mourned greatly for my daughter because I loved greatly. Some of us try so hard not to feel pain at all, and in doing so, we lose our ability to feel joy as well. So, how do we be like Jesus and experience the emotions and the feelings in life? Like really get messy with them rather than pushing them aside. I have 3 ideas about what holds us back and some thoughts that can maybe help us get a little emotionally messy. My first thought is I think we try to keep this arm's length relationship with feelings because that vulnerability makes us feel like a victim. We know that this isn't true, right? We know that vulnerability does not mean that you are weak. We know that. I think we have come to a place in a society where we wouldn't say that. But it is how we live. Am I right? It's like this subconscious thing. Like we don't consciously do that, but subconsciously that's the way we are. I wrote in a journal once, I used to think that a hypocrite was an old Jewish man in a robe and a turban who thought too much of himself in a religious place. Now I know. A hypocrite is when I don't live the things I say I believe. We shy away from feelings because they make us feel weak, and we don't want to be perceived as weak, and ultimately we don't want to know ourselves as weak. Like our inner critics and that like negative self-voice like that Frank was talking about, like it's got enough fuel already. We don't need to give it any more, right? But there's a difference between vulnerable emotions and victim emotions. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of these because I'm already going over, guys. But vulnerable emotions say, this is hard. Victim emotions say, why even try? You'll notice that when you read these things, that vulnerable, if emotions are done right and they're done with vulnerability, that they're going to be empowering you to be honest. That they're going to allow you to own your current feelings and show up in your uncertainty. And they help you to remain open and to ask for help where needed. But if an emotion is being in a victim emotion, it's being done wrong because they are blaming emotions. They're apathetic, like this doesn't even matter. There's no hope here. The victim emotions abandon hope. They belittle and are limiting. Guys, vulnerable, I got to make sure this is clear. Vulnerable doesn't mean deep, dark, and depressing. It just means sharing your heart. I'm going to ask you guys a question. And you guys are going to answer it in yourself. Don't feel like you got to say it out loud. Your answer is probably just going to be 1, 2, maybe 5 words long. Like, this doesn't take a lot of work, but it takes a lot of vulnerability. What do you hope for in your life in the next 10 years? Answer that for yourself. What do you hope for in your life in the next 10 years? And your answer is a vulnerable answer because it requires you to hope. Do you want a baby? Do you want to be a millionaire? Do you just want to be alive? To have a different job? To move out? You don't even know what you want, just something different. Being vulnerable is not a weakness. It is the first step in bravery and courage. Because, guys, you can't be courageous without being vulnerable. If you're not vulnerable, there is nothing to face and overcome, right? Like, someone who's courageous is facing something. They're overcoming something, which means they have vulnerability. Vulnerability for me is holding my friend's newborn baby. Vulnerability for me is showing up on Sunday and standing right there. Because it's right there and right here that we prayed for my daughter. We prayed that God would heal her. And she didn't make it. On the cross, Jesus cries out these words, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I've never related to Scripture so much. But you know what's incredible about this verse, about these words that Jesus cries out? Is he says, my God. And again, he says, my God. That even while I'm feeling forsaken, I still call you my God. You guys, I was afraid for a while to be angry with God. It was like being angry with him would mean that somehow I lost him, and I didn't want to lose him. And then I realized that if God is perfect love, and sometimes we describe him as a lover, and I can be mad at my husband and still love him. So I can be mad at God and still love him too. You guys, God is big enough to experience your emotions with you. He's not afraid of them. We don't have to be afraid of them either. Idea number 2 is that emotions will either heal or harden. The day after we took Edda's body to the funeral home, Adam said something that has put us on the trajectory for this season in our lives. He said, I know this pain needs to be processed. I want to do this because I don't want to be like a person who can't talk about their losses or suffering or embarrassments. I want to heal, not harden. And that became our motto, to heal, not harden. There is like a universal truth that, and there's even like scriptures about it. I didn't go and grab them. That was silly. But there's this universal truth that hardship and trials make us stronger. We know that. I don't like that, but I know that. But I wonder when we say that, when we say that it makes us stronger, what kind of stronger do we mean? Do we mean strong like a rock? Like a rock is strong? Hard and impenetrable? Because you can do that. You can take your emotions and push them down. You will be strong like a mountain is strong, immovable. That's the thing about rocks and mountains. They don't move. They don't change. And life, it's not that way. Life has flux. As Pocahontas says, it's ever-changing, ever-flowing. There's always a Disney quote in my messages. Just watch for it. It's always there. Life has flux. It moves. It shifts. And if you become strong like a rock, you won't. You'll become stagnant and stale, maybe a little stinky in all the wrong ways. When we say that hardships and trials make us stronger, I think we mean strong like a muscle. And I was going to do a demonstration. I was going to have a big rock and then try to find a friend who's got big muscles, and then I got embarrassed and I didn't want to ask any of my muscly friends to come on stage. Yeah. I think we mean strong like a muscle is strong. Muscle becomes strong by healing in the sore and ripped places. That kind of strength is useful and attractive. That kind of strength can carry our families and friends and ourselves. It can grow stronger, move us forward while taking on more than it could before. All because it healed in the sore and broken spaces. Where in your life are you dealing with something? And have you made the decision that you are going to heal from it? Because it's only one or the other. Do you guys realize that? That it's not like it might be this one, it might be this one, or it might be something else. No, it's heal or harden. And since healing is the one that requires work and dedication and time and effort, if you're not actively choosing it, you will default to harden. I'm sorry, but it's true. I knew that in processing my grief, that I didn't want to harden, that I wanted to heal. And let's be real, guys. There's not a whole lot of examples on how to grieve. We're trying to get better as a society, but we're not doing a great job. Other cultures, they kind of have traditions and rituals around it, but we don't, because we like to be peachy clean. So I made it up as I went, and I made up a rule for myself. I said, I think I need to process this. I don't know what that means, but I think that means I want to feel the emotions. I think that'll help. And so I made a rule that I can't say that anything that I'm feeling is silly, nothing, or not a big deal. I wasn't allowed to say that. And there were many times I had to practice it. One time I was making dinner, and I was making your family's got your favorite food, and it warms you into your soul. Yeah, we do, and it's a meal that requires a lot of mashed potatoes, because that's the definition of mashed potatoes, warm in your soul. And so I'm peeling potatoes, and as I'm peeling potatoes, I just start getting all kind of sad. I'm like, oh, man. Oh, and I just stopped crying, and I'm peeling potatoes, which happens with onions, but not with potatoes. And I'm crying, and I'm like, oh, this is just silly. I need to get dinner done. And I stopped. I didn't, beat up myself for saying it. I just went, oh, I think I'm being silly. Put down the utensils, go to the sofa, grab the Kleenex box, and I let myself cry. And I realized, guys, this is my family's favorite meal, and Etta will never get to eat it with us. And then the real crux of it was, I don't get to know what she likes because she's not here. I don't really get to know her. And I could move through that. And the emotion could do what it needed to do, and it could show me that I loved my girl so much and that I was missing her. And then I got back to my potatoes, and I finished our meal. That brings me to my third idea. We need to let it come, but not become. Let it come, don't become. To be emotionally messy, you have to agree to feel. To agree to feel what comes up, but don't become the things that you feel. This is going to be a shocker for some of you. Get ready. Get ready. Did you know you are not your emotions? Your emotions are not you. Right? Wow. Deep. You are a person existing with emotions. You are not your sadness. You are not your anger. You are not your worthlessness. You are not your fear. I think sometimes when we begin to feel, we begin to say things like, I am sad. I am afraid. I am inadequate. And in that vocabulary, we have begun to become and identify as those things. I think we need to shift our vocabulary a little bit to be, I feel sad. I am feeling inadequate. I am feeling afraid. I read this comment on a discussion under a blog somewhere, and it struck me so much. It says, it makes a difference to me to say, I feel sad, rather than, I am sad. When my mood is low, the latter makes me think I'll never change. But the former helps me to remember that it is temporary. Does that make sense? Yeah. You guys, when we go into the I am statements, our enemy, jumps on it. He's like, whoa, you think you're inadequate? Well, let me help you see why. And that inner critic, that negative self-voice begins to come up in us. And you know what? It's like we put on a lens of I am inadequate, and we see evidence of it everywhere we go. Like, I choose inadequacy because when I'm done this message and I head out those doors later, that's the first thing I feel. If I'm honest, I feel inadequate. And you know what? The enemy, that inner critic voice, is going to tell me that I'm right. Because I made a joke a while back and you guys didn't laugh. Thanks for trying now. It's not going to help. My inner critic knows what happened 5 minutes ago. And it's going to be proof. You know what else is going to be proof? The fact that yesterday Adam and Finn had a great day together and I wasn't there, because I spent my entire day putting this message together. It took me all day. Like, if I'm good at this, it shouldn't be like that. I must be inadequate. Shh, Frank. You're obviously not my inner critic today. These are the things that the enemy is going to try to present to me because I put on this lens. And he's like, yeah, let me show you. But when I use statements like I feel, the enemy has a lot less ground to work with. Because when I say I feel inadequate, I can then follow it up with the question, I wonder why. And the enemy's like, you feel inadequate? Well, let's keep working on that one. I'm like, I wonder why. Well, one of the things is that this is hard for me. I always feel like my thoughts are all over the place, and this really makes me have to hone them in and kind of make them coherent, so hopefully someone understands. And it's hard work. And I feel like if you're good at something, it should come easy. But you know what? That's not true. I can do these hard things. And the enemy's like, okay, I can't work with that. I also feel inadequate because this message really matters to me. I am passionate about trying to communicate that in our emotions, if we use them right, we can find freedom. I think so many of us feel bound by our emotions, prisoners to our emotions, like we're running from our emotions. And that's not the work that emotions are supposed to do. That is the enemy using them to keep you from knowing the freedom that is in Christ. Jesus felt emotions. He lived an emotional life, and still he did the work of his Father, and still he shows us what freedom is. I want so bad for people to be able to take their emotions and experience the freedom that emotions are trying to communicate to them. I want them to hear the truth of God that emotions are trying to point out to them. I want it so bad that I'm afraid that I might get up here and botch the entire thing and that you guys won't know that freedom. So I feel inadequate because I put so much pressure on myself. When I can only do what I can with what I have, I got to do my best. But I need to know that that I'm limited. So I give my best. I might be unsatisfied with my best, but then I have to remind myself, no, I am worthy. And this is what I've got, and I'm going to offer it, and God is going to do the rest. So I might feel inadequate because I don't know that people are going to get it, but I'm going to leave the rest up to God. And the devil's like, I'm coming back later. Guys, the point of all of this is by getting familiar and close and messy with our own emotions, we draw close to the messy emotional world around us. Like, guys, I know for a fact you've got some emotional things going on, and I do too. If I can't be emotional with myself, then I can't be emotional with you. And you guys, we are hardwired as humans. We are hardwired for connection. But when I refuse to get messy with your life and you refuse to get messy with mine, I put this arm's length thing between us. And I'm not connecting. Even the most introverted among us. If in isolation and without connection, it eats away at us. It even kills some of us. So, my challenge for us this week is to go out. And this week, first, it's kind of like a twofold challenge. The first thing is feel something. Feel it and recognize it. And then try to watch. Is this a vulnerable emotion or is it a victim emotion? And see if we can find the empowering, honest, truth part in our emotions and praise your bravery in it. And then listen to your vocabulary. Are you using I ams or are you using I feels? And try to apply the I feel and then ask, why? What is it about myself that I need to see? And let yourself experience the freedom that your emotions can bring for you. And then share your heart. I guarantee you that there are people in your life who you know there's something emotionally messy going on. Can you just try this week to step in a little bit closer? Like, maybe just bring it up in conversation. Like, hey, how are things with you and your parents these days? Just give it a try. Try for a moment to let the people know in your life that their emotional messy isn't going to push you away and that you want to connect with them. Because, guys, if we can be honest with our own emotions and engage with the emotions of others and share our hearts, we can become each other's messy, emotional encouragers. And we can fight to show each other the truths and help them dig out the gold and bring us all into this place of freedom together, to experience God's love, to know those truths about ourselves and come back to them. Maybe you have to go tell someone this week that they're effervescent, because maybe they forgot. That's my challenge for us this week, guys. I'm just going to pray, God, life is messy. You know this. You came and experienced this with us. You didn't hide this. I just think sometimes we miss it. God, I know that you are bigger than these things that I'm feeling. I know that your love is greater. And God, I want to find the freedom in this. God, it's going to be kind of scary, but I want to be brave. God, please help me. Please help me find the strength. Please help us this week to just be in tune and noticing of these places where we are trying so hard to be in this extra clean, sterile world and not really getting gritty and dirty and messy and engaging. Because, God, you want us to live life and you want us to live it to the fullest. And in order to do that, God, we have to have these deep wells that we draw from so we can experience the amazing life that you have for us. And that we're going to see that as long as we see it all. God, sometimes I try so hard to just not to ignore, to not engage. But God, I'm tired of my life being shallow. So I'm going to step out in bravery, and I'm going to trust you that there is freedom on the other side of this. I pray all these things in your holy name. Amen.